And for a moment, you feel timeless.
Car commercials are shot in a specific way to evoke emotion and feeling in a viewer. This is done through story, direction, and especially with the way they are shot. But how do you achieve dynamic car movements, and what steps do you need to take to get cinematic looking car shots? In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can achieve cinematic looking car shots by going over a commercial that we recently did for Cadillac. This question can be answered in many ways, but it all goes back to how can you show off the car in its best light? What unique features does it have? What lighting shows off these features the best? What kind of person would drive this car? These are all questions that you should ask yourself before even planning any car film, content, or even commercial. When I started shooting cars, I would just take them to local areas and find the smoothest looking road and hope for the best. What I didn't do is look at the car and choose a location that made sense for it. For example, if I'm shooting a truck commercial, I'm going to shoot in a forest area with bumps and outdoor elements. For this Cadillac commercial specifically, we are dealing with an electric vehicle, so we wanted to see the car connected to nature by placing it in a natural environment. I'm now going to dive into this Cadillac commercial and give you the inside look on how we shot some of these scenes. As I said, this commercial was for an electric vehicle, and we wanted to make it feel as nature driven as possible. The driver is connecting with nature and getting the experience of driving this car and connecting themselves with nature as well. So all these shots are going to be outdoor scenes and playing up with the location as well as the time of day in terms of sunrises, sunset, midday, using trees to our advantage to block some sun and everything like that. This was a very run and gun shoot, so we didn't have a lot of time to even set up bounces, reflectors, or even diffuse the overhead light from the sun. So this all went into planning in terms of a location scout and to planning out all those details. Good pre-production will allow you to walk into any video production, photo production, and just allow you to think freely without the stress of trying to figure out the shots on the day. So I'm going to be going over a lot of composing techniques here and basically playing up on terms of the importance of location scouting and also figuring out what time of day. So this was a 3-day shoot, and this was the first day that we got on location, and this is with the first sunset we shot. So we have our car driving through this valley here, and then this is a 2-shot in the sequence. Then that's the next shot I'm going to cover, but the car is driving off into this direction here. So we framed up the car in the thirds of the frame, and then this is just very pleasing in terms of not being center frame, because anything center frame just feels too intentional. We want to make this feel as naturalistic as possible, so that's why we put the car in the thirds. And we have the sun setting in the background. The sun just dipped over behind here, so this is backlighting the car, which you'll see in the next shot that we're going to be going over. So in terms of everything else that's going on in the frame, I'm shooting this on a zoom lens, so it was a Super 35 lens at 45 millimeters. That's around like a 70, so that's giving us a bunch of compression, and it makes these scenes look even better. I always like to shoot my wide shots on like 50 millimeter and above, usually like in the 85 to like 100 range, because it just gives you so much compression and it gives you scenics and landscapes that look a lot better than being on a wide lens. If we look at the foreground, the midground, and background, we have a little bush here. That is my foreground, so that's providing some depth into the front of the frame. And then I have some trees here on the side. This I would still consider like my foreground, and that just allows the viewer to hone in terms of what we're looking at. We're looking at the center box here, and then more specifically, obviously, the car in the thirds. So that just draws my attention, my direction right to the middle. There's nothing distracting in terms of something shooting up in the foreground or midground, and it's right there. And then in our midground, we have our focus here, which is our car, and then we have all this stuff in the background, then going off into the beautiful sky, and our colors pulled a lot of color out of this in terms of making this feel as naturalistic as possible, but also as beautiful as possible too. This is the next shot here, and this is important shooting any scene, and it's something known as coverage. We shot a wide. There's also a medium in between here where I was hiding behind a tree to get a different angle, and then this I would consider my close-up or tight. And in this shot, I'm specifically walking in and turning my body with the car to get some dynamic in this. The last previous shot here was handheld, and then we go into this one, it's handheld as well with some movement. So here we can see that we're even more backlit by what's going on in the sky, and that's directly reflected on the car. So this is going to give you a nice kiss of light on the back of the car, and it's going to highlight everything that's going on back here and just really get the the high points of the car and make it look good. It goes the same in terms of your subject. You always just want to backlight it. So this just gives me that nice highlight on the high parts of the car, which just looks great. With me being level with the car, I wanted to play up on what are the features of the car. This has a nice grille, has nice headlights. I haven't really seen like headlights this before, even the turning on sequence. So I wanted to highlight that even more with the flaring that we have here. And we were dealing with some nice lenses, so they flared very nicely. So it's just me accentuating the details that are already in this car. And this is the car moving through the frame. And you can see that we have a lot of motion blur in the back, but the car is very in focus. And this is just due to the nature of me matching the movement with the car specifically. So in this scene here, just naturally lit, just backlighting and planning your scene to get all the shots that you want to in terms of your wide, your medium, and your close-up. And then just adding some dynamic into that as well. This shot here is a sequence of our main talent walking from the right side of the frame to the left side of frame. So he's crossing the frame, which adds an element in the foreground, and then he is chopping wood. So this is your classic frame inside of a frame. We're shooting through this nice window here, and we saw this in our location scout. The director, actually Jason, saw this and said this might be a really good shot in terms of having a frame into the frame and making something different. This is entirely shot outside, but this was in a barn. So what we have going on here is just the car lights on and the frame inside of a frame, and then we're shooting at a separate sunset. So this was on day 2. So that gives us this nice highlight in the back. And so we don't necessarily have a backlight going on here because the sun is way too far down. So that is just the highlights that we see in the background, which gives us a little bit more to look at in terms of not seeing total blackness and darkness in this trees. We found that the frame that we're looking at, we wanted to distinguish that it was kind of rustic and wanted to bring up the detail on that. I had my second AC just hold a tube. This was a very light crew and we had multiple people doing multiple roles, and we set that to 3200 Kelvin. So just a very warm color. And then that was just splashing some detail back into here. And then the streak that you see here, it's kind of like an anamorphic lens flare. The window that we were dealing with, we didn't have like a time to clean it properly. Like we wiped it down and everything like that, but there were physical scratches and everything on the wall, and it was taking a lot away from the actual car and what we're trying to look at. So what we had the colorist do, this was actually his idea, is that he just put a flare in here, and it works really well in terms of selling the fact that we're getting this flare from the vehicle, and it just shows off, oh, this vehicle is cool, it's modern, it's giving off this flare. We thought it was very good as well, but it's nice to see other people's creative opinions to add to our vision as well. This is one of the last shots in the sequence. This is the second last shot in the piece. This move I've seen a lot done by other director of photography, other directors, not necessarily this shot, but a lot of people go through the car framing up their subject in the background. And this is done many times, even through the back windows and any other windows like that. It's just giving you that frame in the frame opportunity easily. And then we did this on a dolly to give it more dynamic to show off the car. And what we have here in the background is actually the sun setting. So this is going to directly backlight and give me the detail that I'm looking for in terms of showing off everything. And then I am framing up my subject in the frame of the frame. A big question is like, why wouldn't you put this on the thirds? Why would you keep this center frame? This is center frame. And we're getting intentional at this point in terms of the piece. We're at the end. So this is where we want the viewer to be in your face in terms of what we're looking at. And this is what you do with center framing in terms of like the director or director of photography at this point wants you looking at the center, and that's exactly what we do in this. So that's why we framed them up in the center, and then the backlight from the sunset is just highlighting the high parts, the nice portion and reflective parts of this car, giving some detail on the steering wheel, the dashboard there, and then just softly lighting the interior of the car, which just plays up on itself. There wasn't much we had to do here. Nice looking cars look great with natural lighting. You just want to show it off and highlight it in its best tone. So we just did a dolly through here, and then we also had these car lights on, and then we just had him turn on the accessories from opening the door. That just gives us a nice highlight and something to look up in the ceiling because it's super dark up here. And this is the last shot in the edit. This is a 2-shot that we did from dollying in here, and then to highlight that he's done looking out and he comes back. So again, like the first shot that we talked about, this is just time of day and getting to the location at the right time and shooting a bunch of options. We shot this as the sun was setting, so the sun was like right here, and then it went down behind the clouds, and then we shot it later here, which we liked a lot more to give off and highlight the car better. So that's just a big thing that we did. We love to get options and different types of coverage in terms of even getting the same shot at a different time of day, because you never know where it might sit in the edit. We're pretty intentional where we wanted this to sit at in the edit, which was at the end. So we wanted it to be dark and we wanted it to be very moody and blue. So again, this is just backlighting the car, and then you can see that with the accents on the roof of the car, the hood, and everything, just popping the car out more, acting basically like a big backlight, which is fantastic. And then we position the car so the headlights we're painting on the base of the tree, and then over here to give us some more detail on the grass, just to give us a checkerboard of color. When we're looking at the grass, we could add the lights off, but again, we're highlighting what are the key features of this car, and that's the grille, the logo, the emblem, everything there. And then here we have two silhouettes that we're looking at. We have our main talent, and we have this giant dead tree. And this was a lookout point in the property that we're shooting the location, and we knew that this was the best it could get in terms of being level with the sunset, as well as a nice hero shot where we could have the resemblance of nature with the car. It would be great if this tree was alive, but it kind of played up even better, even in terms of metaphorically, if you want to look at that. But if we look at the basics of cinematography and building interest in your image in terms of light and dark parts, these are all the decisions that we made in terms of shooting at this time of day to get that nice gradient in the sky, and then to highlight the vehicle in its best parts by adding different levels of contrast to it, and then the lights playing on a light part of the image that paints the rest of the ground, so we have even more interest there. There are just so many little things that you have to think about that you do naturally in terms of how you want to position the car in terms of its parked. I just wanted a beam of light going across the grass to add more interest, because it was feeling a little flat if we just faced the car the other way, or even had the car in a slightly off position. And that's even positioning the car at a slight 45, so we can see the more detail wrapping around the car with all the light coming from the sunset. This is another shot that we're going to be looking at, and this is more of a composition one, because the sun is actually angled over here behind the car. So if the sun was here, it would give us a backlight, but this is pure composing and then shooting at the right time of day. If this was midday or anything like that, the sky would be completely gone and wouldn't be providing that gradient that we're always looking for. So this is pure composing. If we look at the thirds, we are positioning two things of interest in the thirds. We have our main talent as well as the car. So it's just, when I look at this, I don't feel distracted in terms of, I can look at the car and understand what's going on, and I can also look at our main talent that when understand what's going on. If I take these third markers out and look at the direction and leading lines of how things are following, you can see that this car is pointing at our main talent. And this dock here is also painting at my main talent. In the actual shot, he's just walking into this frame, which gives us a perfect frame inside a frame. There are just so many things happening here in terms of testing out things. In the first shot that we looked at, we were on the thirds and also between two trees, and that gave us another frame to look for. But now we're on 2/3. If I look at the left side of the frame, I'm directly looking at the right side because of those leading lines and how everything is framed. And this was a shot that we actually got by accident, because there was a picnic bench that I was sitting on when we were doing a battery swap. Once the camera was powered on, this was the frame that we're looking at, because we were getting a bunch of other shots. So this is something that we didn't necessarily plan, and we shot this on a multiple focal lengths as well as the car moving in and out. But for the edit, in terms of how things went, this made the most sense. And now I'm going to look at one of the rolling car shots we had. Just in terms of framing and everything like that, we have these nice leading lines and a nice road to work with that just highlight the car in its best compositional way. And then when we look at where the light is, the sun is just ducking behind here, which you can see that gradient, and that is is just going to give us a backlight, which gives us the best looking image in terms of car, because it gives you these nice highlights on the edge of the car that just brings it up. And then if we were to look at in terms of the shadows and the light parts, we can just see we have so much going on with this car that gives us this natural checkerboard and interest of color. So when shooting any car, always have the light behind it in terms of the sun and everything. Even overhead lighting will look pretty bad. You just have to have the sun behind it in terms of shooting it in its natural best light. This is one of the last shots and one of the most interesting shots that I'm gonna go over, because it deals with a lot in terms of switching up the shot variety and coverage in this commercial as well. This was an interesting scene in terms of getting a different angle. So what we did is we put the camera up on a stand, and I stood beside the camera on top of a ladder and giving us this vantage point and looking down. I do a lot of this in my work because it is a variety and it is a different angle to actually play up on what we're trying to feel. We're trying to feel in nature, so I want to give the perspective of trees. If we could go higher, I would love to, but unfortunately this is as high as we go. So we're working within our means. And this is a time of day thing in terms of having our sun in the background blasting through these trees and creating all these beams of lights and shadow and everything that we look for in terms of interest. If the light was overhead, it would give us a different look in terms of highlighting everything that was going on. We planned to shoot this midday to the afternoon as the sun started to duck, because we knew that we wanted to prioritize the sun and sunset for other shots. So this was just timing a filler period in the middle of the day that we could get one of these shots, because I wasn't too concerned on where the sun would be, because I knew that regardless of the sun's position, shooting through all this foliage, that it would give us an interest in our frame regardless. So I'm intentionally here in terms of where the car is and where my talent is walking. I'm center framed here. I'm kind of in your face in terms of what I want you to look at. So we have the direction of our talent here, and then the car drives off here. So compositionally wise, there's not a lot going on here, but there's so much interest in terms of this angle, what's in the foreground, our focus point, which is here in the midground, and then everything going off in the background. It gives you that larger than life perspective, and then also making everything else feel miniature. I wanted the forest to feel large. I wanted nature to feel large, and the car be a small part of that. And that's something that we explored in terms of direction, as well as how we shot this commercial in terms of tastefully incorporating it with nature. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more cinematic breakdowns like this, I have a video queued up here all about soft cinematic lighting.